No one rises to any higher plane of moral accomplishment than does a godly mother. No one selflessly sacrifices as a godly mother. She shares her body with the unborn. She gives nourishment. She gives protection. She shares her time. She shares her energy, her talent, her very heart as she weeps and laughs through the turbulent changes from childhood to adulthood. No task on earth requires more dedication, commitment, and highly refined skills tempered with compassion and patience as a mother. No human obligation is less adaptable to substitution than motherhood. We can't substitute mothers. And as we look at the various functions of motherhood this morning, I want us to be moved to gratitude for our mothers because of the things that they do and the role that godly mothers have in our lives as well as on this earth. First of all, as we look at godly mothers, we understand that godly mothers are the managers of the home. They are the managers of the home. Proverbs chapter 31. Verses 27 and 28 tells us she watches over the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 14 says, "Therefore I desire that the younger widows marry, bear children, manage the house, give no opportunity to the adversary to speak reproachfully." Notice the order that is there. Marry, bear children, manage the house. Keeping the home, not advancing a career, is the woman's primary responsibility. Now that doesn't mean that a mother can't work. Because we understand that a mother can have a job and she can work and still manage her household. But managing the home is her primary responsibility and needs to be done. Seek and find satisfaction fulfilling yourself in motherhood. After years of experimentation, self-ambition, career-first attitudes, our society is experiencing that backlash against surrogate motherhood. We've caused daycare centers and babysitters and nannies and whomever to raise our kids and manage our homes for us, and we see a lot of the problems in our society that has caused. You can't replace a mother managing her house, and that is her primary responsibility, is to manage her house. We have the worthy woman, and that worthy woman was an example of a domestic manager. Proverbs 31 verses 21 and 22, "She is not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household is clothed with scarlet. She makes tapestry for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple." She's an efficient manager. It says when it snows, they're in red, right? So you can see them. Being the thought process that the mom knows where the kids are. The mom knows what the kids are into. They know what's going on. They stand out to her. She's able to do that. She is a manager of the home. She has her priorities in order, even though she has pursuits outside of the home. And in Proverbs 31, verse 16 says she considers a field and buys it. From her profits, she plants a vineyard. Verse 24 says she makes linen garments and sells them and supplies sashes for the merchants. What does that tell us? She has jobs. She has things she does outside of the home. But what is her priority? Her first and foremost priority is that home, because her family comes first. Verse 15, she also rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household. Verse 18, she perceives that her merchandise is good and her lamp does not go out by night. She does all of these things, but what is her priority? First and foremost, it's her household. Again, in the world around us, we see so many people that have made their careers first. And their family has taken a back seat to those careers. Again, it's fine for women to work. There's no problem with that, but their family needs to be first. And that woman compliments her husband. Verse 23, her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. Verse 25, strength and honor are her clothing. She shall rejoice in time to come. You see this woman who compliments her husband, and she contributes to a bright future for her family. Her family is that priority. Her family is number one. So when you look at godly mothers manage the home. Secondly, godly mothers are models of obedience. Godly mothers are models of obedience. First and foremost, a godly mother is obedient to God. James chapter 4 and verse 7 says, therefore submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. That's told to all of us, man and woman. First things first is God. We make God our priority. So a godly mother puts God first. But then second, her responsibility is to her husband. 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 1, wives, likewise be submissive to your own husband, that even if some do not obey the word, they without a word may be won by the conduct of their wives. Verses 5 and 6 of the same chapter, for in this manner in former times the holy women who trusted in God also adorned themselves, being submissive to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, if you do good and are not afraid with any terror. Submissive to her husband. You see the obedience to the husband. Now, we understand that there's responsibilities that tack on to the husband with that. Father's Day is another month down the road. We'll get there. There's responsibilities for the husband, but wives are to be submissive to God first and foremost. Secondly, submissive to their husbands. She becomes a role model. She becomes the primary teacher of her children. You know, at a banquet, the mother of George Washington was sitting beside a distinguished French officer. And turning over to Washington's mother, the officer said, how have you managed to rear such a splendid son? She replied, I taught him to obey. I taught him to obey. What more can we say for our kids than we have kids who obey? So first, submitting to God. Secondly, submitting to her husband, and then teaching her children to obey. Teaching her children to be submissive. You know, we see a model of obedience in Mary. In Luke chapter 1 and verse 38, Mary said, behold, the maidservant of the Lord, let it be to me according to your word. And the angel departed from her. What greater attitude than to say, let it be according to your word. Whatever God says, that I will do. And think of the ramifications, the things that is going to happen to her because of what goes on here. And she says, let it be God's will. Let me do what God wants me to do. You know, Mary could have offered excuses. She could have argued with the angel. She could have demanded answers. She could have refused. She could have done all of these different things. And she just says, whatever is your will. Godly mothers are models of obedience. And they show that obedience to their children. Teach them that. Number 3, godly mothers are teachers of good things. Godly mothers are teachers of good things. This reflects God's original plan for the operation of the human family. And you know, we have the book of Proverbs is just completely full of admonitions that show that mothers are to be teachers. Proverbs 1 verse 8 is an example. It says, do not forsake the law of thy mother. That's a common expression in Proverbs. You know, Proverbs 31 verse 1, King Lemuel, it says, the words of King Lemuel, the utterance which his mother taught him. Who taught it to him? Mom did. Take note of what she's teaching her son. Again, in Proverbs 31, verses 3 through 5. Do not give your strength to women, nor your ways to that which destroys kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, nor the princes intoxicating drink, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the justice of all the afflicted. Verses 8 and 9, he says, open your mouth for the speechless in the cause of all who are appointed to die. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and the needy. Look at the things she taught him. And it starts out saying these are the things she was taught by his mother. Mothers teach good things. Teach good things to their children. And teaching is done largely by example. You know, when our actions and our words don't harmonize, we do a great disservice to our children. They recognize us as hypocrites, and the effectiveness of the teaching is destroyed. You know, we say all the time, a little kid can see through anything. Be a kindergarten teacher and hear some of the things that little kids tell about what goes on in their house. Little kids see everything. And believe me, the things that they told Katie when she was a kindergarten teacher, sometimes you're like, whoo. They see it. They understand it. So if you're teaching them one thing and you're acting a different way, they see it. They understand that. And they learn from it. We should never demand more of our children than that which we do ourselves. But we've got to be good teachers. We see lots of examples of good mothers. You know, Jochebed is an example of a worthy mother. Her son was born in the midst of difficult and perilous times. And Moses' mother instilled faith in her child because later he was able to make a wise choice. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 23 through 26 says, by faith Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by his parents, because they saw he was a beautiful child, and they were not afraid of the king's command. By faith, Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward. Think about that. Moses made the decision to be with his people. He made the decision to join his people. He could have had a life of comfort. He could have lived a full life in Pharaoh's house because of his position. And what did he choose? He chose his people. I think a lot of that was because of the teachings his mom gave him, as his mom was his nurse through all of that time. What about Hannah? Hannah is an example of a mother who encouraged her son to excel in good things. She prays earnestly for a child. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 11 through 18. She then gives her son to the Lord as she promised in verses 24 through 28. But it says she continued to provide for the child. She continued to come and she saw him and she provided for him and she did things for him. She never stopped loving her child. She never stopped supporting her child. She always kept doing it, even though she had given him to the Lord for service. You know, Eunice and Lois were good mothers and grandmothers to Timothy. Acts chapter 16 talks about that. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 3 through 5 says, I thank God whom I serve with a pure conscience, as my forefathers did. As without ceasing I remember you in my prayers night and day, greatly desiring to see you, being mindful of your tears, that I may be filled with joy, when I call to remembrance the genuine faith that is in you, which dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded is in you also. How did Timothy learn it? He learned it from his mom and from his grandmother. Mothers Grandmothers, you are teachers of good things. We show by example. We teach good lessons. We teach them to behave a certain way. We teach them to act a certain way. We teach them to do things a certain way. And through our example, we show them what they need to do. Number 4, mothers are helpers of the helpless. Mothers are helpers of the helpless. Is there anything more helpless than an infant? Mothers have a wonderful ability to love their children regardless of how ungrateful or hurtful they may be at times. Our daughter, man, she was a stubborn thing. She was a stubborn thing. Y'all didn't get to meet her when she was in her young, stubborn age. But Mama loved her. And Mama kept training her and kept teaching her. And I'd have to say she's probably turned into a pretty good apple at this point. But sometimes they can be hurtful. Sometimes they can be absolutely ungrateful. Proverbs 10 verse 1, the Proverbs of Solomon, a wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is the grief of his mother. Think of how often our mothers have to be nurses, they have to be teachers, they have to be housekeepers, they have to be cooks, they're chauffeurs, they're counselors, they're friends. Baby birds are out of the nest in one season, and that mother bird becomes free from caring for them, but our mothers never stop caring for their kids. They continue to do things even for us when we get older. They never stop caring about us. We go to my mom's. I think every time we show up, she's baked a fresh batch of cookies. Either a fresh batch of chocolate chip or a fresh batch of snickerdoodle because she knows that I like them. She bakes cookies. They do things even when we are much older because they love and they care about us. They never stop being mom. Through her teaching of good things, the godly mother builds her house. Proverbs 14 verse 1, the wise woman builds her house, the foolish one pulls it down with her hands. The wisdom of God is exhibited in motherhood. The greatest lessons we have ever learned have come from loving, caring, sacrificing mothers who were always available to us. I'm thankful that my mom is still around to pick up that phone and to call. I hear my mom talk about wishing she could still pick up that phone and call her mom. We understand the place that they have. We understand the role that they have. And it doesn't matter how ungrateful sometimes, how hurt they can make us. They're still our kids. And we still help the helpless. Moms still help the helpless. Number 5, mothers are to be respected and honored. Our mothers are to be respected and honored. Proverbs 31 verse 28, her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Respect for mothers is rooted in the Old Testament and it sprouts up in the New Testament. Proverbs 23 and verse 25, let your father and your mother be glad and let her who bore you rejoice. But Ephesians 6 and verse 2 tells us, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise. Let her who bore you rejoice, and she will do that by you honoring her. Think about what God thinks of a disrespectful child. Proverbs 19 verse 26, he who mistreats his father and chases away his mother is a son who causes shame and brings reproach. Proverbs 20 and verse 20, whoever curses his father or his mother, his lamp will be put out in deep darkness. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 18 and 19. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father, or the voice of his mother, and who, when they have chastened him, will not heed them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of the city, to the gate of the city. How much honor was supposed to be given mom in the Old Testament times, to the point that if you disobeyed and disrespected her, you could be hauled out to the elders of the city and stoned. We've got a whole lot of kids and parents that need to learn that lesson today. I'm not saying we go back to stoning kids, but we need to regain that level of respect for parents. Why? Because our moms deserve it. Our moms deserve that level of respect. Disobedience to parents is a manifestation of worsening society. 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 2, and Romans chapter 1 and verse 30. We need to honor our moms. Story goes of a man who stopped at the flower shop. He was going to go in and order some flowers to be wired to his mother. She lived about 200 miles away. He was going to go and order those and have them submitted over to the flower shop in her town and have the flowers delivered to her. He got out of his car and he noticed a girl sitting on the curb sobbing. He asked her what was wrong, and she replied, "I wanted to buy a red rose for my mother, and I don't have enough money." The man said, "Come on in with me. I'll buy the rose for your mother." He placed his order of flowers to his mother. He bought a rose for the little girl. And as they were leaving, he offered the little girl a ride. She responded, "Yes, please, if you could take me to my mother." He said, "Where are we going?" She said, "To the cemetery." She walked over to a freshly dug grave and laid the rose on that grave. The man returned to the flower shop in tears, canceled the order, picked up a set of fresh flowers, and drove the 200 miles to his mom's home to honor his mother. We need to take advantage of the time we have with our mothers. And I see half the room in tears at this point. I apologize. But it's true how much honor our moms should get. 1 John chapter 3 and verse 18 says, "My little children, let us not love in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth." Let's make sure we care for our family members, especially our moms and our grandmoms. Let's make sure we honor them the way that God wants us to honor them. You know, like mother, like daughter is actually a biblical expression. It comes from Ezekiel chapter 16 and verse 44. I'll go study that this week. Like mother, like daughter is a scriptural expression. Most of us can trace a lot of our admirable qualities to our mothers. Have we taken the time to thank her? Let each of us thank God for his wisdom as expressed in his plan for the human family. You know, when the human family follows God's plan, when we follow God's plan with a mom and a dad and kids, isn't our society that much better? When we start breaking down that plan is when our society starts breaking down. We have our godly mothers to thank for that. To close, I want to read something. It says, "Blowers of noses and washers of ears, smoothers of bumped spots and wipers of tears, bathers of babies and umpires of spats, finders of boots and mittens and hats, helpers with lessons and makers of beds, shakers of dust cloths and combers of heads, buttons sew-oners and winders of clocks, menders of dresses and darners of socks, tellers of stories and readers of books, judges and juries of conduct and looks, doctors of headaches and hearers of prayers, generals directing all family affairs, tenders of home fires and builders of men, oh, for the gift of an adequate pen. Oh, that we could adequately tell the worth of our mothers. To the mothers in this room, thank you. To the godly mothers in this room, thank you. We appreciate everything that you do. Keep being that example. You know, sometimes we fret about our kids. We fret about our grandkids. Keep working at it. Keep going. Keep being that example. Keep being that loving, caring mother and grandmother, doing everything we can to bring people to Christ, especially our families. Thank you, mothers, for everything you do. If we can help anyone this morning, please come as we stand and sing.